thing, but
Sorry,
I'm
this is
going
Deanna. I
to,
just realized that I hadn't started the recording in case people want to reference
that's
it
okay.
later.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Everybody see my screen okay? Does everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, perfect. So one of the first things I like to talk about is bids. That's a common thing that comes up a lot with different lead agencies and kind of internal processes that they've kind of developed over time. Some of that more so because of maybe like historic DHS stances, but two bids are only required for EAA home mods that exceed $40,000. So if somebody's requesting to use their EAA funding from the next year, and doing one of those exception requests, then you must have two bids. Otherwise, two bids are not required. Granted, for some EAA jobs, some home modifications or vehicle modifications, it might not be 40,000, but it might be a higher dollar amount, and it might be something that you've not really had a lot of experience dealing with before to know if it's a good bid or not, or to know one company from another. So in some of those instances, it does make sense to get two bids. But then in those instances, I would just ask that you assist as lead agencies. You're gonna receive at the end of this training a much smaller list of active providers. If someone were to go on to Minnesota Help Info, it lists a lot of providers, like over 500, and really we probably have closer to 10. So it's really just like challenging for families to make all those calls, and they're not even really sure what they're asking for. And then they're calling people who maybe aren't dealing with the waiver, and it's just very challenging. So if you are wanting a second bid, if you could help coordinate that, that would be wonderful. Now, keep in mind that's for EAA. For assistive technology, two bids are not required for assistive technology items. And that's because, well, a couple of reasons. As I mentioned, we don't have a lot of providers. And we really want them focusing their time working with people versus trying to track down bids. Tracking down bids is very time consuming and resource intensive. And you got to keep in mind that the vendors that they're seeking these bids from, many know they're not going to get the job. Many have been asked for bids 100 times and they're short staffed. And, so these providers are having to like request bids multiple times, takes weeks. And it's really not necessary. And the biggest reason for that being is that assistive technology assessments are different from EAA home modifications, where you have like a contractor and a scope of work and this big project. Assistive technology professionals, or OTs and PTs, who are doing these assessments, they already know they already know all of the waiver requirements, and know that you need to just go with the least expensive that can meet a person's needs. But yet they also are trying a variety of different devices with a person to determine which device will be the best device for that person. And that's really, it's really important that they have the device that was recommended during their assessment, because then we know that that's going to work for them. I always say that the most expensive equipment are the ones that are just sitting in a cupboard or closet somewhere because they weren't what was recommended and people aren't able to use it. And so it's just ends up being a waste of money. The other reason why that there's not you don't need two bids for assistive technology items is because we changed the language changed a couple years back, where it used to say least costly alternative or least expensive. Now it says, now the language is cost effective. And that means that it has good value for the amount of money paid, that you know it's going to be practical, worthwhile, meet the person's needs, have good customer service, be of quality that's going to last a lot, longer than maybe a cheaper substitute. All of those things. So when you're doing um, assistive technology assessments, it's not an apples to apples comparison. There's a lot of things that go into those recommendations that the professionals submit to you. And keep in mind that they don't actually produce this equipment themselves or manufacture it. So they do not have a vested interest in the different types of products that they recommend. They are just purchasing from vendors just as anyone else would. And they're just going off of what's going to work best for the person. The next thing I like to mention is that assistive technology is not just for people who live independently or have goals to live independently. Assistive technology is for everybody. So whether you live in your own home, family home, provider controlled setting, there's nothing preventing someone from receiving technology if they live in a CRS or adult foster care, what have you. I haven't heard it as much recently, and maybe that's because of the staffing shortages. However, even as recent as a couple years ago, I was hearing that, well, we don't authorize technology for people who live in a CRS because they have staff that can do that for them. And that's, for one, we know that they don't always have staff that can do things for them. Currently, the staffing shortages people are only receiving just health and safety services at this point. So if there's equipment out there that can help someone do something for themselves, that then allows staff to do something else that there isn't technology that exists for, that's going to help maximize staffing. And sometimes it might be very small and it doesn't really seem like a lot, but a lot of times as you start introducing technology, people want more technology and start to do more and more for themselves. And then it really does begin to have an impact on people's independence increasing and their reliance on staff decreasing, which is what we really want. So that's another thing too to keep in mind. There is a legislative requirement that technology must be considered at a person's 45-day meeting. Here's the language here. This has been around since 2017. And so this is a provider requirement. It's actually in 245D licensing requirements. But I was hearing that some people's eyebrows were being raised a little bit because they felt like providers were requesting this technology to make their jobs easier at team meetings versus requesting it on behalf of the person. So a couple things on that. So for one, if the technology has the side effect of making the staff's job easier, then that's a really good sign that was a really good technology choice. Because if you can increase someone's independence to the point where it does make staff's job easier, that means it's working. That's the ultimate goal, that they are now independent with something that they were previously, or even just more independent. Doesn't even have to be completely independent, but more independent with something than they previously were. And that's the goal. That's what we want. So keep in mind, providers are required to have these conversations at meetings. And so if they've already had a conversation with the person and the person's like, yeah, I would be interested in that. So when they're making these requests at the team meeting, they're doing so on behalf of the person. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Just because the provider is the one verbalizing it on behalf of the person, if you decide that that technology isn't appropriate at this time, or you don't agree with authorizing it, that's your prerogative. But please do issue a notice of action form to the person and their family, so that they can appeal if they would like, because sometimes that wasn't happening because they were seeing it as being requested by the provider versus the person, but the provider is requesting it on behalf of the person. So I just like to I like to mention that.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is just that, like, there is so much technology out there, so many options that can help people be more independent, and the vast majority can be funded either through state plan or under the waiver. And so DHS has goals around increasing people's access to and utilization of technology and remote supports. And so we really want people to authorize technology whenever and wherever possible to both increase people's independence and decrease staff reliance. Oftentimes there's pretty inexpensive technology out there that can allow somebody to do things for themselves, like turn their lights off and on, or turn their televisions on and off, things like that. That, if you're waiting to go to bed, and if you a very inexpensive Alexa could help you be able to control your environment with the appropriate add-ons, then that, I mean, I would be very upset if I had to wait a half hour for somebody to come turn my light off because they were putting my housemate to bed, when there's this inexpensive technology that could allow me to do that myself. So those, we just really want you to keep those things, and keep those things in mind. Here are the services that fund or support the usage of technology. You'll receive this PowerPoint, and these are all linked. So I encourage you to spend a little bit of time kind of exploring how they can be used together, separately, kind of what the differences are. Just the real Cliff's Notes version here. I like to point out that specialist services can be used both for providing assessments to people who are on CAC, CADI, or BI, since they don't have access to the assistive technology service that includes assessments. Specialist services can be used, or EAA assessment can be used too in those situations. And then when we're talking AT versus HOMAD, the person that does the assessment can also be the person that purchases the equipment and installs and does all that. It's not the same as like a contractor type situation. The other thing so then the big thing is, if you think of assistive technology equipment, that's going to be covered under the assistive technology service for people who are on the DD waiver. And then it's going to be covered under specialized equipment and supplies for people who are on CAT, CADI, or BI. We recently updated the specialized equipment and supplies page to make it clear that that does include assistive technology equipment as well, so that people who are on CAT, CADI, or BI would have an easy avenue to get their technology. Currently, the cap for that is $3,909, but that is going to be increasing to $10,000 annually, as that was a proposal during the session. So that will be happening, I think, going into effect January 1st of 24. And then the big thing I want to mention is when it comes to monitoring technology. So monitoring technology is anything that has a mechanism that can alert a family or caregiver that assistance is needed, or maybe there's technology that's actually monitoring the person through like sensors or cameras, or there's a lot of different technology that meets the definition of monitoring technology. If it meets the definition of monitoring technology, that is funded under EAA. And the reason why that's so important is because EAA has a much higher cap, obviously, than specialized equipment and supplies. So if something meets the definition of monitoring technology, please authorize that under EAA to save on those specialized equipment and supply caps. Okay. We have a little less time, so I'm trying to go fast. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. If I will, I'm sure my fellow presenters will point it out to me at the end. But okay, remote support has been approved for over 25 services now because CDCS has been added, and Adult Day is going to be being added as of July 1st. Okay, I want to say one more thing before I get into remote support. The T2029 code, an e-list is going to be coming out very soon. So on that, but the T2029 code for people who are on the DD waiver is going to have a new modifier. So it's going to have a modifier to use if it's assistive technology or assistive technology assessment. Which that code already exists. But if either of those modifiers to that T2029 code are used to indicate that it's assistive technology assessment or equipment, it's going to bypass that complex review process that specialized equipment and supplies goes through currently. So that's an exciting new change that will be happening for people on the DD waiver beginning July 1st of this year. And then the other waivers when we at the end of our ARPA funding. Okay, so on to remote support. So as you know, we had the temporary approval for a lot of services to be delivered remotely while we were under the public health emergency. However, at the end of 2021, we received permanent approval from CMS to continue providing many of these services remotely, even on a permanent ongoing basis after the public health emergency. So rolling implementation began January 1st of 2022. And so then anyone that you have that's receiving remote support, any of their services remotely, you would want to make sure that they are transitioned to the permanent policy that includes separate modifiers for many of the services, whether they're delivered remotely or in person. And the reason why that's important is not because the providers are paid the same rate, whether it's delivered in person or remotely. But the big thing is that we at DHS, as I said, have goals around increasing usage and access to technology and remote services that we want to be able to run reports and see which services are being delivered remotely most often, which areas it's happening more, which areas maybe it's not happening, so that we can step in and do some additional training. So please, if you have anybody that hasn't transitioned to that permanent policy, please do so as soon as possible, because we'll be running another report here soon, and it would be great to get the most accurate information. Let's see. So remote support is not a service, it's a method for delivering an approved service. So some states have remote support as its own service. We did not go that route. We said we want these services to have the option of being delivered remotely or in person. So when you're authorizing a service, you determine the service. And then the next question is, would you like any of that service delivered remotely? And if so, what things would be appropriate to have remotely versus in person? For a complete list of the services that include remote support option, you can check out the remote support policy page in the CBSM. Also, I want to mention that's one more thing I want to mention about changes too. We have it's going to be coming up fairly soon, a supplemental guidance document that's like 5 or 6 pages long that will that will state in writing in the CBSM many of these things that I talk about during trainings. And the reason being is that, we've been training on a lot of these things for quite some time. However, lead agencies are reluctant to like make these changes because it doesn't say in the CBSM that it's okay, or it doesn't explicitly say it's okay to do this. For one, the CBSM is written kind of gray, vague on purpose to be more inclusive. But sometimes that makes people anxious and they want to really just be able to see more what's, have that additional information. So that will be coming soon. And then you'll actually be able to have something in writing that supports all these things that I say in our training. So that's coming out, I think, in the next month. So remote support is the provision of a covered service by a staff or caregiver who is in a remote location and is engaged with the person through enabling technology that's utilizing live two-way communication. So it's kind of a mouthful, but I'll break that down real quick. So enabling technology is whatever the technology is that's been determined as most appropriate to make that remote support and supervision possible. Excuse me. So there's some examples listed here. Keep in mind that the technology is going to be funded through the services that fund technology, just as they are now. And so if you, so if somebody's decided that they want some of their one of their services delivered remotely as well as in person, then the chances are they're going to need some technology to make that possible. So you would authorize that, as I just explained. So many of the things that monitor or alert are going to be covered under EAA. Otherwise, if it's something that is more assistive technology in nature, meaning that it allows someone to do something for themselves that they would otherwise need staff or caregiver to assist or do for them, then that would be covered under assistive technology or specialized equipment and supplies. So the live two-way communication is a really important part. So we had a service called IHS come out a little while back, and that was the first service to contain a remote component, but it was very limited. It was really just calls, texts, FaceTime. That was it. So it really wasn't in the true spirit of remote support, and it was not something that could be utilized by everyone, because only people who had the insight and ability to identify that they needed assistance and could pick up the phone or and to text their caregiver, they were the only ones that could really benefit from that. So we want it to be for everybody. And so we know that people communicate in a lot of different ways. And so we wanted to include all those different ways of communication. So speech, visuals, signals, or writing, but it must flow both ways, and it must be in actual time. So sometimes sometimes a phone or a PERS device of some sort would be enough for somebody who does have that ability to identify when they need assistance, but other people might need sensors, different, maybe like cameras or motion detectors, different things that will indicate that assistance might be needed. And then the staff can then check in on the person. So that's that whole be able to go two-way piece. All right. Let me see here. I think we're winding down. Yeah. So we already talked about all of this, and this is in the policy, so I'm going to skip that. But this is So why is incorporating support technology so important? And it's because assistive technology and remote support really offer our greatest chance at surviving the current and future staffing shortages issues, which are only projected to become worse. I mean, the next few years is going to be worse than it is now. And a lot of times people think that if we could just increase the rate of pay for direct support staff, that would solve our issues. And it would help. It would definitely help. Don't get me wrong. And I am in strong support of that personally and professionally. But it's not going to solve all the. I mean, there still literally are not enough people to care for the aging and disability population that we have, growing numbers of, and a shrinking workforce. So we have to figure out a way to do this work another way. So the DHS Workforce Shortage Work Group, as well as nationally, has identified support technology, meaning assistive technology and remote support, as the premier promising practice to assist with staffing shortages. It's something that's tangible and that we can just get moving in, get working in there now. So it's yeah, so that's why these trainings are so important. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to pass it on to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We really appreciate it. I just wanted to open it up to see if any of you guys had questions on what Anna talked about. And for those of you who joined later, we do have it where you can obviously turn on your video or unmute yourselves to ask questions, and you can also submit questions via the chat. So just encourage you guys to certainly ask questions as you have them throughout the training. So we'll leave it a little bit for questions. Let's see. Yes, one came in. Anna, can you repeat the part of DD waiver covering equipment and supplies?
Oh, yeah. So we do have CMS approval to combine the assistive technology and specialized equipment and supplies services. However, we can't do that at this time because we have American Rescue Plan funding that is, I think, goes into 2024. And while you have that funding, states have to keep their maintenance of efforts. So there's a requirement that you can't decrease anyone's funding in any service or category while you're receiving this ARPA funding. And so if we were to combine those two services and have people on the DD waiver who currently don't have a cap, have them under the specialized equipment and supplies service with a cap, even if it's going to be 10,000, that's still a decrease technically, because right now there isn't a cap. So we have to hold off on doing that. So in the meantime, we've updated the specialized equipment and supplies page to make it clear that people who are on CAC, CADI, or BI would receive their assistive technology equipment through specialized equipment and supplies. And people who are on the DD waiver would continue to receive their assessments through the assistive technology, or their technology through the assistive technology service. Now, assessments are a little bit different because specialized equipment and supplies doesn't cover assessments. So for people who are in CAC, CADI, or BI, they're going to oftentimes have their assessments done either through an EAA assessment, or specialized service or specialist services can fund that. But yeah, it's also appropriate to kind of think of like some of the specialized supply stuff that people on CAT, CADI, and BI are able to receive through specialized equipment and supplies. a lot of that same stuff, maybe not all, but a lot of that same stuff can be covered under the assistive technology service because it also meets the definition of assistive technology. So does that
I think that probably, I mean, definitely let us know if that didn't answer it. What I might add just for clarification is right now, there is still no cap on DD assistive technology waivers. Is that correct, Anna?
Correct. And the cap for specialized equipment and supplies is still $39.09. That won't increase until next year.
And that's for all waivers except DD. So speaking of other waivers as well, there were a couple of points that you talked about with EAA and the cap and like the exception process and all of that at 40,000. I always just like to note, because I know some of you guys may work with the aging waivers. The cap for EW and CAC is 20,000 for EAA. And currently there's no special exception process with the aging waivers. So that what Anna talked about that $40,000 cap, and then being able to get a second bid if you go over 40,000 and doing an exception, unfortunately does not currently apply for aging waivers.
Yeah. The other difference that kind of along those same lines too is that the 3909 cap also does not apply to EW or AC. So so the 3909 cap really just applies to CAT, CADI, and DI.
Then one of the other points that I always like to make, since while we're not doing a home modifications presentation, it does come up as a question regularly. When Anna talked about that EAA 40,000, all that, same with the 20,000, it is not very well known. So we always like to share it that home modifications can be done in a CRS setting. So a lot of people oftentimes think that you can only do a home modification if the person owns their home or it's a family owned home. But if they are living in a community residential setting, they can certainly use their budget to do home modifications, because the idea is that it's keeping it open and available for them to live in their home, in that space that they're living in. And sometimes without doing those home modifications, that person may need to move. And that's against what we want for anybody. If they're settled in, that's their home, that's where they've lived for a while. So just to note that that is an option that is available in CRS settings. It does not just apply to self-owned homes.
Yes, good point. Thank you, Elena.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other questions? All right, and we'll keep an eye on the chat because I know sometimes it can take a little bit for questions to come in.
And I'll be on for the entire meeting. I'll just have my camera off. So
absolutely. Yeah, certainly lob questions at Anna as you have them. That's what she's here for. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about assessments, which Anna talked about just near the end here. And then we're also going to discuss want versus need, because it's kind of a common point of confusion about as you guys are overseeing the funds of the waivers, when can you approve it? If it seems like it's a want, when does it become a need and is something that we can approve? So that's something that I'm going to have Matt Hansen talk about. So Matt, if you wanted to turn on your camera, I will find you and spotlight you. And there you are. Okay.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Hansen. I am an assistive technology professional and environmental accessibility specialist, and I own Mercaric Assistive Technology. I am talking about assessments today and want versus need. Number one, do you need an assessment? No. If you do, if you know what the person's needs are, we need a single device, something relatively simple, some pressure pads in the home to alert staff of different needs, of somebody getting out of bed, of getting out of a chair, of wandering in a certain place. Then go ahead and give us a call, give another assistive technology professional a call, talk it through. As a matter of fact, we prefer that. We are so busy that we would love to just go ahead and talk through a scenario with you and get the person what it is they need. We'll of course ask for a referral form first, so we have all the information that we need for the person. For a bit more of a complicated system, if we are speaking of home automation or remote monitoring, then we are going to want to come in and do an assessment. We are absolutely going to need boots on the ground so we can take a look around, check light switches, check locks, see where the outlets are, find out just really everything that's going on in the home, test the Wi-Fi system, talk to the caregivers, talk to the person supported, find out all of the opinions from around the home, and talk to anybody who's going to have input for us. That way we can make a comprehensive set of recommendations and try and cover all of the needs. And one of the other reasons for that is if it's not a simple system, a person may say we need an Amazon Echo device so they can voice control some different things. Well, the Amazon Echo device is going to be the bridge and the conduit to voice control those different items, but we need to find out what those items are and how they're going to be most useful for the person. A lot of times when we don't do an assessment, we end up finding we didn't get everything that the person needed. After that, the assistive technology professional can generally come in and set everything up. Make sure the person knows how to use the different devices. As Anna spoke of, there are not that many of us out there. So the time is limited for training very often. So we're going to need to get caregivers and staff on board to help keep training the person in the future. This is also going to help us identify that want versus need. And Elena, I'm going to invite you back in here in just a second to jump in with this with me. There may be times where we're going to go in and we're going to speak to the person and they're going to say, I want an iPad. Okay. Do we want an iPad or do we need an iPad? I want a smartwatch. Okay. Do we want a smartwatch or do we need a smartwatch? So let's dig into this. What are we going to use the smartwatch for? Do we need this for tracking? And can we use a lower level tracking watch? Or are we going to be using this for reminders and notifications and haptic reminders? So we really need to have something like an iWatch or an Android style watch that's going to give us these options. The iPad, same thing. Are we going to be using this because we want to play games on an iPad? I love games on an iPad. I have absolutely no problem with that. As a matter of fact, I encourage people to go ahead and use their personal devices if funded by the waiver for different things like that, because it's going to be good to have the person getting used to the device and wanting to use it. But do we need it for communication, to reach out, to do off-site programming, to do face-to-face communication with a caregiver if they're not able to be there? Again, we go back to caregivers are few and far between these days, and we need all the help that we can get. So we're really going to dig into this. And Elena, if you want to jump in, you do a good job of explaining some different avenues in here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. So when we talk about want versus need, Anna already really hinted at it earlier, just blatantly said it. I don't know why I said hinted at. A lot of the rules were written gray, and that was done intentionally because we wanted things to be more broad, more accessible, people to be able to access and use technology more frequently. Unfortunately, what's happened is people see those gray rules, and because it doesn't explicitly say, yes, you can fund this, people think, oh, I can't. So we're encouraging you guys to actually look at it in the opposite direction. It's gray for a reason. So first you should think, yes. And then if it explicitly says you should not fund it, that's when you should say no. Otherwise, with the want versus need, a lot of people, because of, I think, that gray area, their knee-jerk reaction is to say no, right? Is, oh, I want an iPad. Well, so do I. I want an iWatch. Okay, so do I. So, but like Matt said, figuring out if that person is going to use that or can use that to assist with things that are tied back to their assessed need or their disability, right? Some examples that we share with that is, well, okay, I really, really want an iWatch for my daughter because every one of her friends has it. Okay, that seems very much so like a want. Maybe at that point in the past, you would be like, yeah, no. What we're encouraging you to do with this now is to really have open-ended conversations to discover if there is a need that can be met with that want that they presented as. Because sometimes the people that you're supporting or their families or whoever's having this conversation with you, they don't necessarily know how to explain how they're going to use it right off the bat, right? So with this iWatch, we give the example of like, okay, well, what would she use it for? Like, that's cool that her friends have it and you want her to fit in. That's great, but that's probably something you should buy her, maybe a Christmas or birthday present, right? Well, how is she going to use it? Well, all her friends use it to get text messages. Okay, still a little bit more on the like wanted side. It's not necessary to her disability or her assessed needs at all. But then you can say, okay, is there anything else that you think she would be using it for? And then maybe mom says, well, I actually saw that there were some options where it can alert her and remind her to do things throughout the day. Or like Matt gave the example of haptic sensory stuff that can pull her back to focus or pull her out of a fixation or something like that. Now we're getting into the field where we're actually seeing it more as an assessed need, a meeting the need of the disability, et cetera. And the idea with that, like I said, is really like opening up the conversation to work with the person to determine if it can be covered through their waiver. Because I think a lot of times we say no, where DHS is now saying, as you heard from Anna, we want you to approve it more. We want to see utilization of technology because it's really underutilized. And honestly, Minnesota is one of the most open states in the way that we wrote the rules intentionally to get more usage of tech. And we're a little advanced compared to the rest of the nation, which is great, but there's still so much more we can do. So if you take away something from this training, like I said, it's how to find resources and also feeling confident that you can have these conversations. You can try to find a way to fund it, not the opposite. I know that your job is to protect the waiver dollars and make sure that they're being used reasonably. You can still be doing that while also determining if the things that that person is asking for can work for them and still be covered under the waiver.
You can see why, from a vendor perspective, I am the wrong person to say, start with saying yes. So I'm really glad that Elena jumps in there and says that. As an assistive technology professional and an environmental accessibility specialist, part of our license and part of the license of all of the different ATPs that you're going to hear from is it has to be appropriate for the person. So we are always going to go back and work with you on that. And we're going to make sure that this is always for the health and the safety of the person. Now, I'm going to push back just a little bit on something that Elena said, because to start with yes, from DHS's perspective, they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. But you are also the stewards of the county's money. So it may be a little painful saying yes to some of these things as we get going. So let's start slow. And let's kind of work our way up to some of the different items that make you a little uncomfortable. And I guarantee you're going to find that over time, the more that we are giving people the ability to do things for themselves, the more that they're going to grow in their abilities and be less reliant on caregivers. I have it on my website, but I think I actually stole it probably from ARRM. Through caregiver presence, we diminish the control and responsibility of the person. We are not allowing people to grow as they could. So if we get out of their way and we start saying yes to some of these different things, we find, and there is plenty of data to show this, that people do grow in their abilities and their own personal stake in each of these things. I think that is just about it for me, Elena. If there are any questions, I would love to field those. Elena, you want to run that section though?
Yeah, I think that a question actually did just come through, or a statement possibly. So a barrier is a housing provider slash staff feeling liable for any problem slash payment. Staff not wanting to know how to use tech because they are intimidated. Who are the AT providers who can work with CADI waiver and develop a system down plan slash troubleshooting? So I think, yeah, that's a really excellent question. Anna actually talked about earlier, there is specialized services which can be used to actually pay for repeat training or new training or things like that, that sometimes people will use when it comes to assistive technology. And that's generally speaking, if like an individual has a change in their care or their support and they need to relearn something, or new family or staff are helping them and they're getting all sorts of confused. So that is an option. You can actually pay for somebody to come out to do retraining if necessary. But we also say, like, with the training portion of things, you can call the vendor. Sometimes they have resources that they can share, they can send out to the families, send out to the staff. Or YouTube is really an excellent thing. I know that sounds like not as wonderful as people like to hear, but being able to say, hey, this is the technology, you can literally say like this technology, how it works, or demo or something like that. And that can be a quick training for it. Now to your question on staff not wanting to use it or being intimidated, that's a really, really big part of the planning process for implementing tech. We find that it is really important to get that buy-in from staff. Otherwise, we do see things, unfortunately, fairly commonly, and Matt, you can probably agree to this, where we call like subtle sabotage, or even sometimes really obvious sabotage, where staff either try to convince the person that they don't need the technology that's being implemented for them, or once it's implemented, they try to make it no longer function well. So important things to avoid that is to bring the staff into the conversations, letting them understand the training and all of that. Matt, you say that really well about how you guys train staff. Do you want to talk about that?
So my first answer to that question is, if staff is incredibly against the use of technology, I want to avoid it. That's part of the evaluation though too, and the choice of the technology is we're going to choose something that is friendly to the caregivers that we have. We want to really find out what they're comfortable with and bring it to a level that they can work with. Once again, there are going to be times where we're going to fail. It's just going to happen. There are times when there is still so much staff turnover that inside of 2 years, they literally forget that the equipment is there. These things absolutely do happen. For the vendors that you asked about, Sherry Cook, I know, is online. She is with the Lighthouse in Duluth, and she has brought some people with her. I apologize to all of you. I don't know each one of you, but they can certainly help you out with all of this. Mercaric Assistive Technology can also help you out with evaluations, product ordering, pass-through, tracking devices, pretty much everything assistive technology related. Elena says this at the end of each call: we all work together. We all know each other. I believe we all like each other. So if you get one of us, you get all of us. So please feel free to reach out to Elena and use her contact information at any point, and she can help direct you to the person who can help you.
Yeah, and we will have Sherry and then Sue presenting on their services and different technology solutions after we take a break in a little bit. We still have one more section. We did have another question, another 2 questions can't come in actually. Why does it take so long for tech assessments to be approved in MMIS? Sometimes takes 2+ months, thus delaying support.
Can you take that one?
Yeah,
Yeah. So I kind of rattled it off really quick, but beginning July 1st, anything that's coded, the T 2029 code, if you use the modifier indicating it's for an assessment, or there's going to be a new modifier indicating whether or not it's assistive technology, those will actually bypass this complex review process, which is what takes so long. So there's this complex review process that means that claims has like 45 or 90 days, something really long, to determine whether it's approved or denied. Sometimes they send back denials without an explanation, and it's just been this really like cumbersome, burdensome process that didn't need to exist. So we finally have these modifiers in place that will make it so that if you authorize an assessment with that modifier, it'll just go through MMIS just like any other service you would authorize. So
Now, I'm going to throw a little caveat into that too. When getting assessments under the DD waiver with the T1029 code, that is absolutely the truth. If you are on a CADI waiver, many times the most appropriate code to use is the T1028 code for environmental modification assessment or environmental accessibility assessment. So that code does not have a review process. So that one's going to go through. Also, that one goes against the $40,000 EAA budget and not the 3909 budget. So we found that that is absolutely the code to use when available. Anna?
yeah, no, I mean, I think that explains it. Yeah, that answers it.
And go ahead and ask well, it's always going to be up to the county. I will say that over and over and over. We will suggest coding as assistive technology vendors, but the ultimate decision is up to the county. But when we send over a quote for any of these different items, we're going to put the suggested coding on there. We do get a lot of pushback, and people will say, no, you're wrong. This isn't. No, we're not. We're not wrong. We do this thousands and thousands of times. So we've had a little practice at this. But it is ultimately up to the county and how it is you do things.
I also wanted to add, one of the other reasons that you're seeing a slowdown with assessments is there just really aren't a lot of professionals in the state of Minnesota that do these assessments. So that is another place where you might be seeing delays and things like that. So Matt said at the start of this section that you do not always need an assessment. One of the things is if you know what type of technology you want to implement or that you're going to implement, go for it, right? You can do pass-through billing through a company like Mercaric or Syngistics or other companies that can order that piece of technology for you without needing to have that assessment. On the flip side, if you know that an assessment is going to be necessary or be really, really helpful to support the person and make sure you're finding the best solutions for them, one of the options is if you know that there's some stopgap technology that you could implement now and then schedule and wait out for the assessment. Don't feel like you have to wait for the assessment to implement any other technology, right? Like you could say, hey, I know for sure that this person is going to need a vibrating alarm clock because they are not waking up. All right, get that. And then still do the assessment later, right? Like there's nothing that says you have to delay or wait because you need that to also be included in an assessment. So just wanted to make that very clear. Another question actually that came in, we've got two more. Are you aware of enrolled providers that will have these products available? That's a huge barrier right now. I think the biggest thing is, I may have just covered it too with pass-through billing. So even if you're not working with like a residential services provider that can access the technology, a lot of them can't. A lot of them don't have the correct, I'm going to say like certification or licensing through the state to be able to be assistive technology vendors, essentially. So they work with companies like Mercaric or Syngistics to do pass-through billing to purchase the items. Matt, did you want to add something
If
to
it's
that?
findable, if
Yes.
it's findable, we're gonna find it. I did go through a scenario this morning, a person looking for a stove shut-off device, and those things, supply chain issues, 4 different vendors working with, nobody's got one. And I'm talking to the CEOs of the companies that make these things. It's the world we live in. So we do our best to find workarounds. If something is out there, it's in our best interest to find it for you. So we'll do our best.
And then I guess this is kind of along the same thread as, does Mercaric and other vendors have AT items in inventory and install and troubleshoot / repair?
Some. For troubleshooting and repairing, we always have some different items. And I can't speak for other assistive technology vendors. I just can't. We always have, a handful of each item available. Keep in mind, and people will say it takes a long time to get an assessment. It takes a long time to get us in there. We're working with hundreds of people right now, and we have to really temper what we do with getting to people as quickly as we can, but still giving each person the time and the concern that they deserve to make sure that things are done right. I say quite often, it's better to do things right than to do things fast. Well, that's tough these days. So we're going to do our best to find a happy median.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. If there are any more questions, we'll obviously keep an eye on the chat. I wanted to open up in case anybody had questions before moving on to our next section. All right. And Anna just added a little note about just reiterating why we don't want to do 2 bids for everything, because it really does slow things down more than necessary. And it's important for us to move as quickly as we can now with the strain with the lower providers that we have available. So our next section is going to be with Kit Piltingsrud and to talk about tech for transitional age. So let me spotlight you there, Kit. All right, take it away.
Hi, I'm Kit Piltingsrud, and I am a training specialist and assistive technology professional with Mount Olivet Rolling Acres, and work with them for about 1.5 years now. But I have the unique perspective that I have been a special education teacher. I did that at the high school transition age for approximately 12 years. And fell out of love with public ed and went and started supervising group homes for disabled adults. And all of that assistive technology that I worked so hard to get into the hands of the students that I had was suddenly gone when I got to the group homes, and not really sure where it all went. And I started doing some research and realized like how much change happens between school age and what's considered to be adult age. Now, as a teacher, I spend so much time like learning all the technology myself and making sure that students are using it throughout the school and making sure that I have lesson plans for all of my students and making accommodations and all that kind of stuff. So my day is very filled with making sure that students' needs are met. And I never really actually thought about needing to even if I had the time, but I hadn't really thought about making sure that families and caregivers had the technology as well. I would sometimes send it home and kind of give a brief overview or something of how to use it, but I never had the time to actually go out into the home and show them in situations how that can be utilized. So the number one biggest issue is that if a school system purchases the assistive technology stays with the school. It doesn't follow the student. So we need to make sure that that all of you that are case management work with the families to ensure that maybe they get another device that they can utilize at home. So that way we can have that advocacy that happens through the school age case management, transition case management to adulthood case management. And then we have different teams in all three of those settings. And we need to make sure that there's somebody in each one of those settings that can help make sure that that technology follows through. Now at the school system, we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And with that, it is mandated that if we have assistive technology that can help address their academic goals, that we need to be able to utilize that. And then 245D legislation that requires us to have the conversation of assistive technology at the 45-day meeting and every year after that. So we're not just trying to get technology, we're actually required to have those conversations. So yeah, I think that's, I want to keep it short today because I know we're already over time, but Elena, is there something else that I usually say that you need me to say?
I think that you covered everything. I just think the biggest thing is, like Kit said, it's really, really, really important to engage in those conversations. And you, in the roles that you guys are in, especially if you guys are in that transitional case management period, try to engage in the conversation with the school, just because there's so much that you can learn from them, ensuring that they can bring that technology. Also, I don't know if you mentioned this, Kit, the school typically pays for the tech that they're using there.
I did talk about
okay,
that.
so that the waiver can also still pay for the stuff at home. So yeah,
right.
I think
and they can pay for the education that needs to happen at the home as well. Just because teachers don't have the ability to go out there and educate with all of the other demands that they have. Mm-hmm. But I mean, with all of that said, it's wonderful when we can get technology put in place so that people can be independent, especially when it comes to communication devices and those kinds of things, when people can have their wants and needs expressed. You want me to tell my story now before we get to the other?
Well. We're going to talk about remote support in the next section, but Kit has just an amazing story that highlights why technology is super important. So yes, I love it. Take it away.
So if any of you have time, and you can go to the ARRM Assistive Technology Resources website, there's a lot of really great success story videos on there of technology that has really helped people become as independent and lead a life of dignity. And there's this one that I just absolutely love that is a group of men, that 4 men that were living in a home, and they decided to do overnight supervision, a remote overnight supervision. And you know, they got trained in how to do it. They were finally like set and going solo on the whole thing. And I mean, they absolutely love this. Like, you show up there and they want to show you their robot house. So they're like super into this. And anyway, so they're flying solo, and and the remote system gets an alert that the front door has opened at 11:30 at night. And of course, this is a concern, you know, a stranger coming to the door, or somebody is leaving and shouldn't be. So they call the house to find out what's going on. And it turns out that the guys had decided to pool their money together to order a pizza. And nobody had taught them how to do this. Nobody had suggested this be something that they do. And for something that you and I would be very commonplace, that we're having a midnight snack, and they just did. And it still gives me chills every time I tell that story, that we were able to give them that autonomy for them to be able to live that kind of quality life.
I love it. Thank you. Still love the
Yep.
story. every time.
I do too. I do too. Yep.
Are there any questions for Kit? All right. I'm sure there will be stuff later. So actually, just for timing, I'm going to give you guys a quick break, a 3-minute break. So if you guys want to come back at 11:15, hopefully it gives you enough time for a quick bathroom, quick water grab, and then we'll jump into the next part. So see you all at 11:15. All right. Sorry for such a quick break. We're just running a little behind on time. So for my next presenters, if you guys can trim off just a titch on each section, that would be fantastic. So this next portion, we're going to actually talk with Sherry Cook, Greta Jenkins, and Sue Redepenning about the services that they provide, and then get some examples as well of different technology. So Sue, I'm going to have you kick us off here. So I'm going to just spotlight you real quick. All righty, and take it away.
All right, so I'm going to try to screen share. I'm going to mostly show technology. And as I'm doing this, I want you to keep in mind, I'm not saying this is something that Live Life Therapy Solutions is the only place that can do this. So the Lighthouse Center for Vital Living, Live Life Therapy Solutions, clinics, schools, many of them know of this assistive technology. And the main thing I want to show you is what it is so that you know what's available and some of the choices, and it's not everything. And then each of us can talk about our services. So I'll tell you about us first. So Live Life Therapy Solutions, let me just get this to play from the beginning. We do have some grants and we do services throughout the state of Minnesota, but we always try to get you to the places that are closest to you. So if you don't know where they are and you've reached out to, the Lighthouse Center for Vital Living or some of the clinics, and you're not having good luck, you can always come to us and we'll help you get where you need to go. Technology for Home is a grant that's funded by DHS Disability Services, and that is for people who live in a home of their own or with their family. So it's for marketplace housing. It's not for provider owned, not assisted living, not group home, unless the person has a goal that's active, which means you have a date of when they're going to be moving to a home of their own, and they need AT assessments before they do that. So that grant funding is all for independent living with family or on your own. That grant right now, we have had an overwhelming number of referrals this spring, and our current contract ends June 30th, and the next one does not begin until July 1st. So we have closed referrals right now to catch up. So that grant's not taking any more referrals for a couple months at least. AT for Wellness is a grant to help people have telehealth needs met, remote needs met, and it can help us with doing training and providing technology and all of that for the person. But we're trying to focus on areas outside of your area because the Lighthouse Center for Vital Living has that grant too. So they'll talk to you about that. I prefer you utilize their services, and then they'll let you know if you're in our area and not theirs. And then Live Life Therapy Solutions, we do billable services, and we can bill all the service codes, but we tend to bill the T2013 because we do have a 245D license and we are OTs, PTs, and speech therapists. So that's specialist services. So we tend to bill that because it doesn't affect the person's equipment or assistive technology that they need the money for. And then I get a lot of questions about this. We do not bill MA, we do not bill insurance because we're going and traveling and we're going into the home. There is not a way for that to happen and be fully billable through insurance, MA, or Medicare. The Lighthouse Center for Vital Living does bill those entities, and they do have a clinic. There also are clinics that people can go to that do assistive technology. Those should all be utilized first. And then when there isn't a service out there, that's when you would go to waiver. And so I get a lot of questions about that. That's why we're not billing that. We're the entity of last resort when you've tried all your other solutions. We only focus on AT, so it usually takes us less hours to get in there and do it and less hours to get back out, but we only want to be used when other services have been exhausted and your local services have been exhausted. We provide AAC, which is communication assessments for people who are nonverbal, and looking at technology for that. And we do smart home technology, sensory, which is technology, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we do durable medical equipment assessments. And our waiver billable services are throughout the state if they're needed. Now I'm going to show assistive technology so you have some examples of, low tech to some higher tech. All of us that do assistive technology can do simple things. And oftentimes when I see people, when I ask them what the best thing I did for them, it's some of these simple things because they are meeting the need, they stay working, they didn't need internet. So they're very excited about a lot of these things. There's a lot of remote controlled lighting where if somebody can press a button, and there's different sizes of buttons or switches I can add to some of these devices, that's all the person needs, to have those in a place where they can pull up to or walk up to easily and hit that switch. And so that's a very simple low tech solution. I have a lot of people who have falls at night and they don't want to leave lights on at night, which I totally understand. And so having a light, and these are just stick up lights that are battery powered that just go on when the person gets up and then goes back off after they've passed by and they haven't walked through again for a while. You can also get plug-in versions of these too, and they have a sensor on them to come on when the person walks by and to shut off after a certain time. This is very low tech, but really meets the needs of the person. If the person already has a smartphone or they already have some type of tablet, adding on an app that can do smart home technology, if the person can just, direct select and touch that device, is very simple. And then the app itself is usually free. And then it's the technology that I'm adding on that costs money. So we will look at that for people who are able to do that simple type of touch for smart home. We still do memory aids that are, technology driven, but the lower tech Digital recorders, voice recorders are still very popular and very needed. Or if a person has a phone, we'll do the voice memo app. I have a lot of people who use that to remember things throughout the day that they need to either add to their calendar or put into their schedule or to do something with. So it's a very good low-tech cognitive reminder. And some of these devices do transfer right directly. They'll have Dragon Naturally Speaking built in, and they'll transfer onto a person's computer. Medication reminders can be simple to complex. This is an example of the Dose Health one, but a lot of these devices will have an alarm or a reminder. Some of them, like this device, can send an alert if the medication wasn't taken to the person, and then as a backup to the caregiver if it still hasn't been taken for a period of time. Alerts also can be adding a strobe so that someone actually sees a visual alert, adding motion, so a vibrator alarm so that the person feels that impact of the alarm going off if they can't hear it or see it. So there's all different types of technology that can be for people who have low vision, who have low hearing or can't hear. So we always show those types of technologies. A lot of low vision aids now are compact, they're not expensive, they can be built into a tablet. So a lot of tablets are replacing multiple devices we used to get for someone. So if somebody has an iPad or they have an Android tablet, there are apps that we can add. Some are free and some are paid for apps that can help to read things to the person, like their mail or labels, or can help the person take a picture of something in their environment and it tells them what it is that is in front of them or that they're wanting to know what's there. There also are some handheld magnifiers, and they talk to, so that if someone needs to, have something read to them, there's handheld versions that can fit in someone's purse or backpack. And then the table mounted ones are a lot smaller than they used to be. They will magnify, they will light, many of them will play things back. I always want to try these different options with the person to see what works best for them. And I'll either meet them at a low vision store or I'll bring the tools out to them to try it in their environment if they can't get anywhere that I can meet them. For communication devices, we do have speech therapists, which I know is unique to a lot of the AT vendors that they don't. So sometimes that is a niche where we do have to help if there is no local resource in the medical model for your person to get to. So for communication devices, this is one thing that's considered durable medical equipment. And so MA insurance and Medicare can cover these devices, but what is needed is a speech therapist to do the assessment. And with that has to be trials. There's no way around it. You have to do an assessment, and then you have to, unless the person is replacing a device they already have and you can assess that, then you have to do trials of not just different apps within one company, but you're really supposed to look at all the different vendors that are available, all the different types of tablet to more durable options, and then narrow down in those trials what device is the one that you're going to go with and why. And then a lengthy speech therapy assessment has to be written and given to the vendor to send into the funding source to get it approved. Doctor's order and a face-to-face have to happen too. And we do focus on that and help with it. Schools can do it, clinics can do it. But oftentimes what we've noticed is with really complex people, sometimes if a clinic only focuses on AAC a little bit of the time, they're going to have a hard time with the complexity of the complex person. And so sometimes we help with that part. And then once the device is decided upon, we can get the person back to a center or a clinic or the school to do the training. Mounting, so there's all different types of mounts: floor mounts, wheelchair mounts, bed mounts, and phone mounts. These are for computers, they're for communication devices, they're for switches. And a switch, I'll show you some pictures in a minute, is something that can be used to help somebody control things, to give them a better placement for how they're going to touch to control. So this is one switch that is very unique. We see a lot of people with really high level injuries, spinal cord injuries. We also see a lot of people with ALS who lose movement. And this device can allow for sip and puff. It can allow for chin control, and it can allow for joystick control, like by moving your head and holding on to the device with your mouth. And so this device works really well for communication devices, for using a computer, for gaming, for smart home technology. I've had a lot of people use it. It's mounted onto the person's chair or onto a surface the person's pulling up to be able to use. Environmental controls are anything that the person can use in a different way, either with touching or with a switch or with their voice, to be able to control their lights, power door, heat, air conditioning, anything that's on, off, and electrical is what we're looking at. And we're all trying to use off-the-shelf technology as much as possible to keep the prices down. And then also because a lot of people do already have these, or they already know how to support them, or family or caregivers can learn to support them more easily. I'm going really fast to stay in my time frame. There's also environmental controls that can that are more dedicated to somebody with a disability, because we do know that the off-the-shelf doesn't work for everyone. And so there still are switch activated devices, and a switch, like one example is that yellow circle. There's all different sizes of plug-in switches that can plug into something like this device, which this device lets the person hit the switch and scan through their lights, their like radio, like different things that they have plugged into plugs in the wall that this can control by the person activating the switch. There's also devices like communication devices or devices that are dedicated to smart home technology that we can use to be able to operate things in the person's environment. Mobility equipment is a durable medical equipment, and bath equipment is also. That needs a PT or an OT and a vendor to be able to be considered durable medical equipment, and a doctor's order, and sometimes a face-to-face. We help with that. The lift card is something that is waiver paid for, but it's something if someone needs to be able to get up and down stairs, either temporarily to get into a home or in an emergency situation. This one has a motor in it, and it allows help to be able to do that. So the caregiver still needs to use some power, but not as much, to help someone get up and down the stairs. And this is for somebody who really needs a temporary option or an emergency option. And so they wouldn't want a chair lift to go up the stairs and down, because they don't need that on a regular basis. Sensory equipment is considered assistive technology for somebody with a sensory disability. And the important thing is that's everything from, you know, small items like a weighted blanket or weighted shoulder device, to having the home have a calming space, some outdoor sensory space, and some indoor sensory space for alerting. And it's really important that the person has an assessment to know like what their sensory needs are. And then we try out the devices and make recommendations. But the waiver can pay for these items under assistive technology. And then safety equipment. We do alerting devices that alert the person. So it's like a cue to them that will chime or let them know that they should really let someone know they're leaving, or that go back to the family or the caregiver so they know somebody opened a door, somebody opened a window. GPS alerts to know kind of in vicinities of where people are that might wander. So these are things that when we're seeing somebody, it doesn't go to an outside entity to monitor these, but back to the person and to their family. So funding for us for an assessment, training, and equipment, and we do all of those like setups and things like that, come through waiver or the grants that we have, or we do some very limited private pay. Our company does not order any equipment. We go to outside vendors to get you a bid, and we don't sell equipment. All right, so I'm going to stop there so that Sherry and Greta have time.
Hi, this is Greta and Sherry. We are driving a couple hours to a visit. So we've been joining on Sherry's phone the whole time, but Sherry is an assistive technology professional at the Lighthouse, and I am an assistive technology specialist. And we also provide essentially the same set of services that Matt and Sue described, and they did a wonderful job of doing so. But we consist of 3 different divisions. One, we used to be the Duluth Lighthouse for the Blind, the Lighthouse Center for Blindness and Vision Loss, and now we've expanded for all these in all age groups. So with that, we still have our adjustment to blindness division. They host camps for transitional age youth. We do have students that we call our in-house students. So they come for several months for adjustment to blindness training. And much of that work is funded through state services for the blind. And we work with them sometimes on different tech referrals or tech trainings and things like that. We also have 2 occupational therapists. They do bill MA and medical insurance, and also are supported by our grants for their work. They specialize in blindness and low vision OT, but they do serve all disability sets across the board. So any OT referrals, they can take those on. And then there's us, Assistive Technology Division. So we have a device lending library, like Sue mentioned, doing device trials and seeing how things work. Are they effective for the person before they make the investment or bill the waiver for a particular device? We want to know if it's going to be effective. So we'll do a device trial with either devices from our library, which we're continuing to expand as much as we can, or we can borrow from the Simon Pacer Technology Center, or the Minnesota STAR program, since we're a STAR partner. So lots of options for getting a device for a trial for folks. And then we, like Matt mentioned, the training, especially with caregivers and staff, is so critical. So we also ensure that we have a good implementation plan and provide the necessary training for those to be effective for the individual to live more safely and independently. So right now, our services, we do, Sherry's able to bill waivers, and our OTs do bill medical insurance. And then we also have several grants right now. One of the big ones is very similar to Sue's Tech for Home that she mentioned. So this is for folks that are on Medicaid or waivers, receiving other home and community-based services, for them to be able to remotely connect to their home and community-based services. So this could take the form of lots of the different devices Sue mentioned. It could be safety monitoring, such as a GPS watch or a door contact, like Kit mentioned, knowing when a door is open to be able to remotely connect and alert staff. Or it could be a cell phone so that they can do their calls and meetings with you as case managers. Or it could be some kind of device for telehealth. So this is a DHS grant, and we have it, like Sue mentioned, our first period through the end of June. Then we have a second period, July 1st through the end of March of next year. So this can be used to fund devices and also the service associated with those devices if folks need, and also the training and staff time driving. Matt had mentioned doing home assessments. We do that too. We can also do virtual assessments and meet with folks and do training that way. Or if it is just device training and they have means of transportation, they can come into our clinic. We are moving buildings. So right now we're located in West Duluth, but in June this summer and July this summer, we will be moving downtown right across from the Duluth YMCA. Which we're really excited about. It'll be a great space. We are expanding and it's going to be bigger. And one of the highlights for us is that we'll have an assistive technology demo room and demo space. It'll be quite expansive. So that'll be open to the public for people to come and see what devices there are to try it out, to see kind of mock setups of different living arrangements using assistive technologies. And many of them that Sue covered will have similar in our demo space. So you can come and check that out, hopefully starting in September or October of this year after we move and get settled and get everything all set up in that space. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Sherry, am I forgetting anything?
Hi, this is Sherry. I was driving, as Greta had said, we're multitasking. No, Greta, you did a great job. Just we do cover the Arrowhead region, and if a area is underserved, and we have grant funding to go, if there's no one else to serve it, we can go outside of that Arrowhead region. And we do have referral forms on our website. Anything else that you might have a question, you can always call into the Lighthouse and ask for Greta or Sherry, or you can try to email one of us. I'm really sorry that we weren't able to put together any kind of information or PowerPoint or anything. It's we are just busy with one of our grants that we have running right now that Greta had mentioned, our Tech for Connectivity, and so we are en route. But we do work with everyone that you've met that has been on the panel so far today. And so if there is something that we have a question on or is not our area of expertise, we will reach out to others that are sitting here to pull them or someone from their team in and help us out with things that we don't carry the expertise in. So I guess I would just say, thank you for listening to us and not being able to see us and us having any information to share via screen. But, reach out if you do have any questions. And again, if you have anyone that you want to make a referral to, you could go to our website. And did you put it in the link too? Okay. And I think Greta did add it in the comments. But thank you for giving us some time to chat with you.
Thank you very much for presenting too. We appreciate it. I appreciate that you didn't just throw me under the bus. I did ask them to join this pretty late, so they didn't even have the chance to have it on their calendar and plan around the travel. So it was very, very kind of you guys to take the time while driving in the car to meet with us and give explanation of your services. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to open up. Are there any questions for Sue, Sherry, or Greta? And while I give you guys some time to do that, I just wanted to mention, it was brought up a few times about the STAR program. That is Minnesota's federal AT program. And similar to how Sherry said that they're a partner of theirs and Sue said that they're a partner of theirs, the STAR program has a lending library. They also have free consultations. They have a smart tech lab that people can do a walkthrough, although I'm sure that they would recommend you guys utilize Sherry's team for that because it's more local for you. But it is a free program and it's available to everyone, not just people on the waivers. So it's called Minnesota STAR program. The only cost associated with doing a lending of technology, so you can actually take it out as a loan for 45 days. There's only the cost of returning the equipment after you're done testing it. So they do a lot where people are testing to see if a technology is a good fit for somebody. Even they've said that they do a lot of if a piece of technology breaks in their home, just as a bridge till they get the piece of equipment fixed or replaced. Thank you, Anna. Anna posted their website. They also have in partnership with a lot of their partners, they created a site that you can go into and look at different technology options to get a feel for things. It's kind of a library style where you say, I'm looking for adaptive daily aids, right? And then you can filter based on keywords to find technology that's recommended. It's a really, really cool site to just play with if you're wanting to get a feel for different techs. As Sue showed, that's just a sliver, tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of what's available out there for technology. So hopefully it starts to get your gears turning on, really, there is a piece of technology out there that can be used for every single person on your caseload. And we really, really encourage you guys to take that away from this training and to really reflect on, hey, how could I use technology to support each person that I'm working with? I don't believe I saw any questions come in. Oh, Sherry, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, if it's been a lot of overwhelming information for everybody today, and we thank you for listening, but also it's not necessarily your job to know all of the things that are out there and available. Like Elena had said, that's our jobs, to keep up on the latest things and trials, and know what has worked with someone that may have been a similar case in the past. So just send in referrals. And if you think that there might be something useful, let us know. But if you're just like, I think that they just need help, then we can come and do a big full assessment. So there's, like Elena said, there's probably something out there. And it's not necessarily your job to know exactly what that is. That's on us. So
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really excellent point. It's trust us, reach out to us, get in contact. We do case consultations, right? You can reach out, you can send me an email. If I can't answer it or recommend technology, I can get you in touch with any one of these experts. At the end, I'll share my contact information, and we'll also share a resources document that gives the links to all of the presenters here, plus any other waiver certified providers that work in this space. So you guys will have a nice resource list. Anna usually covers how, if you go on mnhelp.info, it looks like there are 500 plus providers that do assistive tech. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. They don't necessarily actively provide it, or they might provide slivers of it or something here and there. So this list is one that's been filtered through a couple of different places to confirm that these are active providers of assistive technology, remote support, emergency response, and resources in the state of Minnesota. So you'll get access to that. Since there aren't any additional questions for Sue, Greta, or Sherry, I'm going to turn it over to our next presenter, who's going to talk about remote support, and that's with Kathy Larson. Here you are. All right.
There.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay. So my name is Kathy Larson. I am with REM Minnesota and HSI and TBI Residential, and I'm the Director of Remote Supports and Assistive Technology for the company. And so I work across the state and trying to help set up any type of assistive tech for the individuals, as well as looking at monitoring technology and remote supports. So what I'm going to talk about today is how we would use some technology in a CRS environment to help support the individuals that we're working with. And since our presentation is 2 hours today instead of 4, we usually cover a lot more here. I'm going to try to cut it down to just some of the basics of what can be done and provided in a CRS environment. So at the 45-day meeting and the annual meeting, we all know we have to discuss technology. And so in that discussion, we're looking for the opportunities for the individuals to be able to use technology and what those possible options might be. So some of it is going to be around all the assistive tech that you've just talked about, or you've just heard about. All of those type of assistive tech possibilities that'll help an individual be able to do more for themselves in the environment, as well as then provide for the staff who's there to be able to do other things while that person is on their own, able to turn on their television, turn on their lights, all of those types of little things that oftentimes staff are having to spend a lot of time on. So we're looking for opportunities for individuals to do more for themselves with that assistive technology. We're also looking for opportunities to increase independence by possibly replacing the need for an overnight staff having to be right there on site. Right now, we can use and apply for something called an alternative overnight supervision technology license. I say right now because legislatively, it has just been eliminated the need for any special licensing in order to use technology supervision for overnight. So we now can come together as a team, and this is, when I say now, this is starting August 1st, I believe it is, and it may actually be January 1st. So we're trying to get more details on that in the future. But coming up in the future here, we'll be able to come together as a team and make a decision. What does this person need? Do they need an awake overnight staff? Do they need a sleep overnight staff? Or will they be able to use technology overnight supervision? And so that technology overnight supervision can be provided by a group of staff that are close to the site that might be called in if there's something needed. And or we might use a remote support company that would be able to provide that supervision and then notify us directly at the CRS that we need somebody there immediately. Is there an emergency? So we're using remote support companies. There's several of them that are out there that we use for unique situations. And we determine which company based on the needs of the individual and what type of technology we might need to be in place to support that person on the overnight. So not only can we use technology to support overnight supervision, we can also use technology during day supervision. And there is no special license that's required to use technology supports during the day. So all of what we need during the day, we can provide with remote support if that's necessary. So an example might be, we have an individual who they can't be alone during the day, but all of their roommates are off at work. But we decide that they can have alone time during the day if they have remote support supervision there to support them instead of having to have a staff person there during the day with them. It's not going to be something that's appropriate for all individuals, but in some instances, it is appropriate to have the remote support there on site to support the individuals. And this could be through a two-way audio video device, a two-way audio device. It could be with different sensors. So we will make the decisions about what's appropriate for that person and be able to put into place technology to support them in that environment. Those are some of the main things that we look at in supporting individuals, but we may also be looking at devices that help with supervision or safety needs. So this could be an individual who maybe gets out of bed and they're not safe to walk independently, but we don't always know that when they're in a room with the door closed. So it's a way to alert the staff that maybe somebody's getting out of bed, or potentially a device that alerts us to that an individual is potentially having a seizure or some type of device that's monitoring for rapid motor movements. Or it could be a device that is notifying us if there's movement outside the room through a motion detector. But there's different devices that we can utilize that keep monitoring individuals for safety and security reasons with a staff person still there in the site. So it's also considered a form of monitoring technology, not necessarily assistive technology. And those are other opportunities that we might be looking for, something that can help us with those safety issues. I think that's all I'm going to go through so that Elena, you have time to go through what you need to talk about. Anything else in particular? Any questions in regards to use of technology in a CRS?
I feel like it takes me way too long to figure out the spotlighting and everything. Thank you, Kathy.
Trying to cut down my time so because I know we're short. So
I mean,
yeah.
you did
Anything else?
really trimmed it, so thank you. I would just add one of the things, right? Like Kathy's background is in a CRS setting. A lot of the examples she gave, that stuff can apply to non-CRS settings as well. Remote support in general is a really, really excellent way to keep people independent and less staff reliant, as Kathy highlighted. And one of the big things that I always like to hit on that Anna McIntyre mentioned from DHS earlier is that technology can be approved to help staff too, because ultimately by helping staff, you are also you're removing the staff doing something for the person. So independence is being built for that individual. So it's really, really key to look at both assistive technology and remote support as a solution for people that you support. And Kathy and we also typically have like Anna Hegland from Dungarvan. They give some examples of people who are really, I mean, even bed bound, that they've been able to use remote support or different technologies to apply and use that person has that privacy overnight. They don't need to have that staff waking them up to do a turn or things like that. Kathy, did you talk about the bed? I feel like that's one that I always like you to highlight. I know that's more assistive tech, but it's just so cool.
Yeah, so we had a situation where we had two staff on the overnight, and it was due to the fact that we had an individual that was bariatric and had decubulous ulcers, and we had to do turns every 2 hours. And every time the staff would go in to do those turns, they would be waking up the individual, tugging on them, pulling on them. So it was a very disruptive sleep for the individual, but also to staff these days on an overnight is impossible to awake staff. And so what we were able to locate was a bed that actually, with the changes in air pressure, would adjust the individual and help with some of those turns that the individual needed to do through a technology device that allowed us to then move to one staff on the overnight that would go in and very subtly move the individual and help turn them. And the individual got much better sleep. We had much easier time locating individuals to staff and less workers' comp claims because you're not straining your back when you're trying to turn and pull on people. So it was a win-win for everybody in that situation. So it's really looking at what is the challenge that's there for the person and trying to locate the appropriate devices that might help in that particular situation in either reducing staffing or changing staffing in a way that's going to overall help the environment. And we all know how many homes are having to close these days. We are trying to use every resource that we have to keep those environments open for the individuals and still ensure their safety. So this was a great opportunity to implement a device that helped everybody.
Thank you. And I love highlighting that too, because that may feel like it was just for staff, but as Kathy said, that person got better sleep. That person had more privacy. They didn't have two people coming in and moving them around. So there is always that piece when you're looking at it that, you know, waivers and things like that can cover this service because the individual is benefiting from it. So thank you so much. And I didn't see any questions come in. I'm just going to pause again to see if anybody has any questions that they wanted to submit. And while I do that, I'm going to pull up just kind of our final slide. All right. Are you guys seeing the screen here? All right. I think
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. So I just wanted to share this. This is something that you guys will receive via email, along with other presentation materials that were shared during the presentation today. But this is that resource list that we've talked about. So just to highlight, these are the ARRM resources and Minnesota NEAT resources that we mentioned. So Tech 101 is a course that consists of 4 modules that have video recordings and resources that you can download and things like that. And it specifically covers how to have the conversation, planning, funding, and the implementation. So we encourage you to certainly go and access that. It's absolutely free, watch at your own pace, and you can pull information from that or share it with individuals or providers or anybody that needs would want that education piece. The Technology Resource Center was mentioned as well. We've got case studies, articles about different technologies. Tech 101 is located on there, as well as videos that Kit had mentioned earlier that show success stories and show individuals talking about their experiences themselves and families, which work fantastic when you're having a conversation with an individual or family to showcase how the technology can benefit and be used, hearing it from somebody who experienced that themselves. And then we mentioned Minnesota NEAT. The webinars that we do, information about our upcoming webinars are listed on the website, as well as the recordings from our past webinars. So you can go in and, like I said, they're very topic specific, so you can go in and see those. Now these I'm going to move through very quickly because this is, again, a resource list. All of these have links so that you can access this, but these are the assistive and enabling technology providers in the Minnesota that can bill the waivers. These are the personal emergency response providers that can bill waivers. I also encourage, if there are providers that you do not see on this list that you know you work with, please email me and let me know. We've run this list through a number of different groups that work in the technology space to verify that these are correct, but we're human and we all make mistakes and we could miss things. So definitely let me know. Then we've got remote support providers as well. And finally, additional resources, which includes AT labs, lending libraries, educational sources, etc. This AT for All, that's the website that I was talking about that does the library style search function for technology. And then these are the Centers for Independent Living. I always like to highlight these. These are resources in your county and region that provide services and just really an excellent place to reach out to if you're looking for support. Lastly, here's my contact information, and obviously you can write this down, email me for anything. I can get you in contact with anybody. I will also share the contact information for our presenters following this training, so you have that as well. But I wanted to get you started so you can reach out to me right away if you have questions or want to talk about specific people that you're working with or anything, right? And then please, 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 if you can take the time now that we have 4 extra minutes at the end here to fill out the post-training survey. This is really, really important for us because it's something that DHS is tracking to determine if this is something that maybe we want to offer more regularly and doing updates and things like that, or just ensuring that if there's changes that we need to make this training more applicable or more effective for you, we're able to do that. So please fill out this survey. It would mean a lot to all of us. And I think that a few questions may have come in, so I'm just going to look at that. Oh, just a question about how the specialized bed was covered, and Kathy responded to say that EAA, but she would be sure to check with the doctor to make sure the bed will meet the need for turning. So yeah. Any other questions, feel free to submit them. Otherwise, I'll leave this time open for you guys to fill out that survey. And thank you all so much again. And thank you to our panelists and presenters for being a part of this. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this training with us and to attend this training. And hopefully you'll be able to start implementing technology services for everybody you support, and you'll see the massive difference that it makes in people's lives, which is exactly why all of us do this. We love to see those outcomes. So have a great rest of your day as well. And I'll stay on for a little bit just to see if any other questions come in and to give you guys access and time to write down this information and access that survey.
Thank you, everyone.